Welcome to Standing Up. Welcome to the second episode of Standing Up. This week I spoke to Kefah Abukhdeir, a very inspiring Palestinian activist. We had a great conversation on so many issues, and yet we barely scratched the surface. And that's really the thing with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's so deep and so complex that we could have spoken for days and still barely scratched the surface. But not only is it deep and complex, it's also a conflict that arouses immense emotion. So no matter what was said in this episode, there will be a group of people that will be upset with what they hear. And that's okay. We don't need to agree on everything. But I will urge you to listen with an open mind and an open heart to what Kefah has to say, and to try to understand what her experience is like being a Palestinian living under another nation's military occupation. And regardless of if you think the occupation currently is necessary or if it's just, that doesn't take away from her experience. In addition to that, there's a narrative that I hear often, and I'm expecting to hear it more as this podcast goes on. It goes something along the lines of, if you criticize your government, you must be against that nation. So for example, I've been accused multiple times of being anti-Israel because I'm critical of the Israeli government. But it's because of my love for Israel that I'm critical of the government. I feel a moral obligation to speak out against injustice and to do my small part in helping my nation become the best possible nation it can be. And we do that by criticizing it and condemning it when it does something we feel is wrong. On the contrary, I feel like if you refuse to criticize your nation or your government, you're doing them a great disservice. So again, I don't accept that narrative. That doesn't mean you need to agree with everything I say or everything Kefah says. And by the way, me and Kefah disagree on many things. And if you disagree with us, feel free to challenge us on anything we say. But if your response is that I'm somehow anti-Israel, I'm just going to ignore that comment. I mean, I don't got time for that. Let's have real conversations. I think you guys are going to enjoy this episode. It's one I enjoyed immensely. It's a topic that is very close to heart and close to home. Kefah is very inspiring, and it was a true honor getting to speak to her. Enjoy. Oh yeah, about the production. In a certain aspect, I improved. The production, in a sense, is better. On the other hand, I made a pretty big noob mistake. The focus of the camera was on the mic and not on me. I guess every week I learned something new. And on the bright side, the mic looks fantastic. So there's that. Enjoy. Salam alaikum, Kefah Abukhdeir. I hope I said that close to okay.
It's good. It's good. You
Good
did
enough?
well.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Good, Azad. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a real pleasure getting to speak to you.
Thank you.
A little bit of background about my relationship with Kefah. Close to non-existent. We've never met in person, but we are in similar circles on Facebook. One of the beautiful things of social media is it gives an opportunity for activists all over the world to communicate. It allows Israelis and Palestinians to communicate in an easy and safe way. So I'm very optimistic about social media and how it can help us in activism. And I'm sure, Kefah, maybe you have similar thoughts on this. Have you seen that social media is an effective tool to use in order to reach the other side and to bring people together towards common grounds? Or has your experience shown you something different?
Absolutely. You can say that we grew up basically in the struggle and anything and everything that had to do with Palestine. I grew up in the U.S. and basically our extracurricular activities for my family was spending weekends organizing activities or things for Palestinians. And it always stayed within the community. And the only time that you would deal with Jews and or Israelis would be outside and um, meaning in diaspora, like it was a lot more comfortable to talk to them. And with the advent of social media, this is like, I've seen that activism come together and it's here. Like we can comfortably talk to each other here. The same comfort that we had talking to each other in diaspora, it's now happening on social media and it's happening on the ground in Palestine, and people meet up. Like it's not like, like you'll be talking to someone and then you find out they're about 20 minutes away.
Right. So you're saying that the activism in many ways can start on social media, but then it needs to evolve to in-person meetups.
Well, not just that. Like before, like I said, it was mostly Palestinian activism was more or less in the community. You had you would have Jewish participants and or Israeli participants who were sympathetic to the cause, but that only existed in diaspora. I never saw it here until social media started to come up.
I understand.
Like you'd have like left movements here, like within Israeli society, and it would be only left. Like you wouldn't have. I never saw Palestinians there like back in the day. Now there is. Like it's a
Right.
little bit. It's starting to integrate a little bit more.
Right. I feel a similar way. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Like that's what I'm, because before I just felt like everything was so part. Now everybody knows it. Like about each other's events. Like before you wouldn't know that. Like
for sure. I've been a supporter of the work you've done just through viewing it through social media for years now. You're
Thank
active
you.
in these groups. You helped share a perspective that many Israelis don't get to see, being a Palestinian woman. So you definitely helped show me a side to the conflict, a side to Palestine that I was less familiar with. And I think, and this is without us even getting to meet one another. We were just in the same
Yeah.
Facebook group. So I
Right.
think there's tremendous power there. I'd like to see it more and more utilized by the average person. I mean, imagine if every person made an effort, every Israeli and every Palestinian made an effort to make just one friend on the other side via social media. Talk to that
Right.
person, hear about them, their struggle, their concerns. And often when you open up to somebody and are willing to listen, then they're gonna open up to you and then they're gonna listen in return. So, when we could have these respectful and compassionate conversations, it often opens people up to hearing a new side that they otherwise would have been closed to. And I think social media is really the perfect platform to do that.
And it's I don't know how to describe it. Like at the first point is that it's broken down borders. There are no borders. And then at the same time, again, like I said, it's brought the struggle here, or the what I hope to becomes an integrated struggle, and a co-struggle, and that it's brought it here. It's not just something that happened in diaspora with a bunch of lefty Jews and Arabs or Palestinians. No, it's actually come here on the ground, and there are people organizing events. I think that's been the hugest shift. And what you're talking about, the relations, in that we're all occupying the same space. We're more or less encountering the same things. And we've influenced each other greatly. Linguistics. You've taken on a lot of our culture. We're always complaining about the food, the different customs, the history. So whether or not we like it, we are influencing each other. And I know this because when I'm not here in Palestine and I'm with other Arabs, There are certain things that are part of Palestinian culture now, and I know it's because of Israeli and or Jewish influence. So, and it's really like you pick up on it, like it's very nuanced and it's very subtle, but it's there.
Right. All right. And I think that's an important point, because the past, presence, and futures of Israelis and Palestinians are so intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
They're so intertwined. Not only land, we live amongst each other. We're inhabiting the same space, and our cultures have began to also somewhat merge. And
Right.
you know, so many people are in favor of a complete split, but it's hard to see how a complete split happens when we're already so intertwined and living amongst each other. And I think this is one of the reasons why, when it comes to what is a viable solution, no one really seems to know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, it makes sense that they should split because Israelis and Palestinians have such deep mistrust in one another, right? Trust, fear,
yeah.
and hate. So how can we live together? But then on the other hand, how can we live separately when we're, intertwined? And I'd say recently the deal of the century was presented,
Mm-hmm.
and ask the average Palestinian, it's a joke of a deal, right?
Right.
We'll get into that, but
Uh-huh.
it seems because there's this, there's a natural conflict. We
Mm-hmm.
don't get along because of such deep lack of trust.
But why would we have trust? What
Well,
institutions exist? What type of intermediate anything that
yeah,
brings it to community? We have I think the one thing that's probably another shift is not just social media or these of communication, is also university. You have a lot more Palestinians going to Israeli universities, and I think this has also shifted um, a lot of views, and it's broken down a lot of barriers. As for the mistrust, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I think that's a model of the fact that we can exist together, and that, I mean, look at all the Palestinians. There's some universities are up to 50%, and some are down. Some they can Israel. A lot of the big universities still have a cap at 20 for Palestinians, but Palestinians are coming in, and they're assets to the university, and and for themselves, and they're doing really good, and they're not threatening the Israeli students that are there.
right. And
Does that make sense?
yeah, for sure. And that in turn helps us build the trust needed in order to live amongst each other.
And I think that can translate
Right.
into other areas. We don't have any type of common education. Within Palestine itself, we have every area is different. We have different, and that's not to mention, as I understand it, in Israel, it's the same thing. So we have all these different spots of education. Nothing is bringing kids together to where they can understand the environment and the people that occupy that environment.
Right.
So Palestinians, they never take anything about Israelis. So the way that they know Israelis is through occupation. The way that they know Israelis is through like most Palestinian children, the first time that they will see a Jew is a Jew in fatigues or holding a weapon.
Right.
And they will not see them as equals or in their neighborhoods. It's always in some kind of very structured type of, where the Jew or the Israeli is in some higher level, like never as just like as another student, like we both went to kindergarten together.
Right.
Or we both played sports together.
Right. It seems like the average Palestinian's only experience with Israelis would either be a soldier or a settler, none of which
Or somebody
truly treat them with respect and dignity. And I'm not speaking bad about any soldier or settler individually, because once you actually meet soldiers and settlers, you actually see that they're human beings. Some of them are some of the kindest people you will meet, but
There's no way I could there's no way I could understand that. Like,
right.
I live in Shafat, and all the arable land that's around us, you have to understand Shafat is a peasant village. We're a village where all the main families have always been peasants. So to take away our land, it really does mean something for us, as does most of the Palestinian population. So as like for me, a settler, like when they excuse me, when they first came in to settle, the settlers, they were mean, they were horrible. We weren't allowed to go onto our lands. They were throwing rocks at us. They had weapons. There is nothing that exists, or no factual evidence. Okay, because I like to go by what I see, not by what people tell me, to show me that a settler is a good person because of what was done to us, and it affected us greatly.
Right.
Because because the way that we don't go get mortgages, and we don't go take out loans to like for our kids to, like when they get married or whatever. We build. We have extra land. We go onto that land because this land was passed down to us from our grandfathers, and on that land we build for our children. They've taken away the land that my children would have built a house on.
Right.
And they took away the option for my family to expand.
And your experience here is not individual. Many Palestinians have experienced something very similar to what you've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're actually getting at something quite interesting, because my experience with settlers, I consider them some of the kindest people I've met, but it says something about in-group, out-group mentality. So,
Right.
and we've seen this all throughout the world, throughout the ages.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the kindest, everybody has an in-group and an out-group.
Right.
So
Right.
you could be super compassionate and kind to someone who's deemed your in-group, and then treat your
Right.
out-group like complete trash.
Right.
So my experience with settlers and soldiers is these are super nice people. But here you are with a completely different experience, you being on their out-group, and you say they've treated you like garbage.
Right.
So I think it's powerful that we can see that difference, that you and I can sit across from each other and see how differently the same people treat one another based off where they're from. And I'd say there's something very similar amongst Palestinians. So many Israelis would say they haven't gotten good treatment from Palestinians, or hostile vibes, they could say. But
Right.
those same Palestinians that might be hostile towards Israeli are probably some of the most compassionate and friendly people you will meet if you're in their in-group. So I think
I'm absolutely sure of it, because I've seen some of these people out of uniform and they act normal. And when they don't necessarily think I'm quote unquote Arab or Palestinian, and when they do find out I'm Palestinian, I see the the switch. So when I'm speaking my good American English, they think that I'm an Israeli who made Aliyah. And then when I'm like, I did not, and you see this switch. And you see, like, with institutions like settlers or settlements and the IDF, I see them as huge barriers to making the necessary connections. Because again, when you bring up soldiers, we don't serve in the IDF, and there's no way we would, because the IDF to us is the occupation. 60% of their operations are in our neighborhoods and on us. We do not see it as a protective force. I do not feel protected when IDF is in my neighborhood. And I mean, I can relate incident after incident where their presence has meant my, or whoever's in my community, their danger. Settlements, I do not see them as developments. It's not it's everybody, like when I see a lot of Zionists talking about, they're talking about them like they're subdivisions, and they're not. I mean, they're taking away property. This property, like the ones around my village, we paid taxes on those. We've been paying taxes since the Ottomans on those properties. So for
Right.
you to be invested, the zoning, like Ramot Shlomo, which is right next to us, we did everything under the sun to try to save it. And we've actually been doing it since the Ottomans, trying to save that land, because we have. There's a lot of stories about how the family would try to avoid paying taxes on it because we didn't like paying taxes to the Ottomans. So there was a lot of paperwork done under the table so we could hide who the actual owners were. And then the British came, and then the Jordanians came. We actually had, there's also land here taken over by the Jordanians. And we protested the exact same way. My grandfather was put in jail for protesting the King's Palace that is on land by Pisgat Ze'ev. So just we do not like foreign entities because, I mean, I guess another thing I'm trying to point out, it's not necessarily just because they're Jews, is we see it as people stealing our property that
Right.
we've invested in and taken care of.
Right. I think you make a very important point, because a part of the narrative amongst Israelis is that Palestinian nationalism is a direct result of Israel's existence, and its purpose is to destroy Israel because Israel is a Jewish state. But there are signs of Palestinian nationalism prior to the Zionist movement, Zionists returning to Israel at the end of the 19th century.
Right.
Like you mentioned, they were protesting the Ottomans and the Jordanians. So you come from one of those families that has been part of that Palestinian struggle prior to the
Yeah.
days of
My
Israel.
I have my dad's brother, like he died as a result of injuries from being incarcerated by the Jordanians. My uncle used to print leaflets against the king, and my uncle was a communist, and they're usually pretty anti-monarchy. So, and he also recruited and had meetings against the monarchy and for Palestinian freedom. He owned his own printing press, and he was eventually smuggled out of here to the U.S. See, I'm third generation Palestinian. My grandfather was there, came back, raised his sons here, and then we went back again. So the way that my uncle was smuggled out was he had whatever paperwork from his father, smuggled out of Palestine to America.
Interesting.
So again, no, it did not start because the Jews. It started because, again, stolen property, people being expelled from their homes, and the same thing we had seen. The Jordanians weren't as brutal. The Jordanians did not expel us. The British didn't do well, and I mean that's pretty well documented. The intifadas under them. My family also took part in those uprisings too. And against the Ottomans, our family is known for not letting I don't know what you call them, the Basha. A Basha is like an overlord, and we never let them take over the land. So every time like somebody would try to come take over Shafat, we'd kill them. So
Interesting. So it's been, you come from a village with a lot of pride and a long history of, defending that land.
yeah.
Okay.
Because it is said that Shafat was at one time. The Shafat is the shortened version for the King Yehoshaphat. He was a king here, and this was his kingdom. So we were, yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the issue of soldiers, because that's one of the biggest areas of contrast, I would say, between both sides. There is nothing that causes more fear or hate amongst Palestinians than seeing an Israeli soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to ask an Israeli what a soldier means to them, it means their security. Israelis are freaked out by the concept of not having a strong military to defend ourselves. And our collective trauma goes back many centuries, and our history on this land, and the brutality of terror attacks, just reinforced trauma that we've had. So for me, it's very difficult, because when I speak to Israelis about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, most of
Mhm.
them are not hopeful, and they're not so open to hearing the other side's narrative, which I think is a huge
Mm.
issue. But
Okay.
I often hear their main concerns, and they say, well, if we don't defend ourselves, then we will all die. What can I really tell these people? Because I recognize how harmful the soldiers' presence is to Palestinians, but how can I explain to Israelis that they will be safe if that presence disappears? And I I, I don't have a good
Yeah, but
enough explanation yet.
do they, okay, but you're dealing with a majority Muslim population. I understand the concept of having military protection. That's an inherent right.
Hmm.
Everybody should be secure and protected. And nobody's arguing against that. What we're arguing against is the fact that this is not protection. Them sending the soldiers into our areas, they are constantly picking on us. They're saying rude things. They're
Hmm.
groping. I have had my house searched in ways nobody should have. My children witness a lot of things.
Right.
Having dogs go through the house. Dogs for a Muslim. I mean, we're Muslim again. We're Muslim. Bringing dogs into a Muslim house is extremely. Um, I mean, it's just a huge sign of disrespect.
Mm.
The areas, before Intifada 2, they weren't as aware. I will say that, like, Intifada 1, like everybody says that we had it better. We didn't have it better. There were curfews. See, I used to come visit during the summer, and we knew you do not leave Shafat after 10 o'clock because there would be curfews. And the curfews were enforced because you'd have a Jeep with a bunch of 18-year-olds. And depending on their mood, that's how you got treated.
Right.
After Intifada 1, Intifada 2 is when we started seeing the checkpoints. Intifada 2 was absolute hell. The checkpoints were moving all the time because they could not figure out Hamas. They couldn't figure out when the next bomb was coming. And every time something happened, it was locked down on us and the soldiers just coming in. And everybody, and this is what I get from Israelis, they think it's this like, these, like in the movies, they're like, they know what's up and they've got their order. No, it's chaos. There's a bunch of pissed off Jews who just saw a bus blow up and they're coming to take it out on the Palestinians. And that's literally what we would see. So basically, then with the Intifada 2, like we were taking off our clothes at all the checkpoints. The beginning, they were, again, comes to gender and cultural issues. They were having women strip, because for looking for the suicide belts. And they would do that with male soldiers. And then you had observant Muslim women, or just women in general, who didn't want to do that. So they started bringing in more females so that we could strip easier. Like I thought it was just so bizarre, having, I personally, I always refused. And the
Right.
first request I would make to the Israeli soldiers is, if I'm stripping, you have to strip too. Because I don't know, maybe you're the guy with the suicide belt. I don't know. But it was just the
How,
most bizarre time to live.
how would they respond to you not willing to strip?
Like, I'm a smart ass more than confrontational. And then I get confrontational. So for a lot of them, and then hearing it in perfect English totally threw them off. And then what was even worse was when it would be an IDF soldier who's an American, or who wasn't, like, more or less born and raised here. So they hear this woman with perfect English just saying no and talking to them, and you could see, like, it's like they get out of this reverie, this like haze. This is because, for more or less, this is what's sad, is my English humanizes me. I
Right.
don't, I'm not speaking that guttural Arabic, and I'm dressed nicely and I have on heels. So, and then telling me to take things, like they see that what they're asking is so ridiculous. I'm not one of them. Um, so, um, I mean, the other thing is also had two houses demolished. So, and you get these cavalcades of soldiers and the authorities that come in. So basically, it's the undercover cars. I mean, we know all the different factions or the levels of authority in Israel. You have the undercover cars, and you have the undercover Shabak or the Mustarabin, which are people who dress like us and speak perfect Arabic and blend in with us,
Mm-hmm.
and we're always under surveillance. And then you have the IDF, you have the 18 to 20-year-olds who are just you and your luck with that group. And then you have the guys in black, and those are special forces, and you don't mess with them. So that's how I color code it. So if guys in black show up, you don't do anything, because those guys are trained, and they will knock you out. Green guys, no,
So
not as bad.
this is a whole side to the military that I'm not familiar with. So I don't know if you know this about me, but I was a soldier myself, and I served in the West Bank in Palestine.
Okay,
And
okay.
at the time, my ideology was vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think there was anything wrong. I was raised on a very, very specific narrative. It's our land. We don't hate Palestinians, but we need to fear them because they hate us. And because they hate
Okay,
us, we need to defend ourselves against them. That was the narrative I was raised on. I wasn't taught to hate Palestinians, just to fear them, but I wasn't taught anything about their narrative. Learning their
right,
narrative slowly got me to change, um, my worldview. It got me to understand that there's humans on the other side that have
right,
every right to want independence and freedom and prosperity. It took many years for my belief system to evolve,
right.
because deep-rooted teachings don't change overnight. Um, but I never saw soldiers. The soldiers then were my friends. Now, I did
Right.
see instances of abuse, and it bothered me. So even though I didn't see anything wrong with, me being a soldier in
Mm-hmm.
Palestine, I I was upset whenever I saw abuse, and I did see it a
Right,
few times. It's more prevalent than any Israeli would like to admit, but those who
right,
serve in the army and are paying attention see it.
right.
Um, it's Israelis. It's interesting because they have a very deep hate for the organization breaking the silence. They see it as an anti-Israeli organization that's trying to undermine Israel's security. What
Mm-hmm.
breaking the silence essentially is doing is highlighting soldier abuse in the
Right.
Palestinian territories. So if you don't like breaking the silence, well, then you shouldn't like the abuse of Palestinians, because they're just a result of that happening. If you want to kill breaking the silence, then have the Israeli army start punishing soldiers who abuse Palestinians. They're
Or
doing
recruiting Palestinians in an egalitarian army where we're all protecting each other.
that. That's an even better solution. Yeah, I agree. Um, I do want to. I do want to stay on the topic of soldiers for a little bit, just because I think
Mm-hmm.
that I would like for the audience of this show to be very broad. I would want people who are in the pro-Palestine camp to watch this. I would want people in the pro-Israel
Right,
camp to watch this. And ideally, I would want, after people watch enough episodes, to then become pro-Israel and Palestine, not one or the
right,
other.
right.
So I think that if someone in the pro-Israel camp is watching this, they still have a lot of concerns. I think what you've helped them show, what you've helped show them until now, is the struggle that Palestinians deal with every day, what it's like to be a Palestinian, needing to deal with checkpoints, with soldier abuses, with having homes demolished, and how this struggle spans over a century and even prior to Jews coming here. Where I think they would still have a bunch of questions or concerns is what practical steps can be in order to achieve peace. So we mentioned soldiers. I know that recent polling showed that the majority of Israelis support a two-state solution, and they support pulling all soldiers out of the West Bank.
Okay.
But it doesn't seem. So I see you nodding. Do you not think that?
I don't know. I mean, when they say pull the soldiers, why just soldiers? Why not the settlements?
So I actually didn't see that data, but I actually think that the amount of Israelis that would be okay with that is also fairly high, if not the majority. But I think the concern is with this, and again, they don't agree to do it unilaterally.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, and this is what many people are calling for. Let's say tomorrow Israel were to pull out all soldiers and all settlers. Is there a guarantee that we won't have a similar situation to what we have in Gaza, where Hamas takes
re-elected? Why would? Okay, but look, we had different circumstances. Hamas was elected when Fatah failed. Okay, Fatah had failed at two things. At the time, he had Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat supported Iraq. Remember, there was the first Gulf War, and Kuwait takes out all its money. There was all these economic things that also got Hamas into power. Hamas also did a lot for infrastructure, which is absolutely missing on the Palestinian side. So yeah, you guys take out the soldiers, but you do not have a public sector and you do not have an infrastructure to support those people that are going to stay there. Same problem in Gaza. Like, for instance, under Oslo, we are not allowed to manufacture.
Right.
We can put things together. We can assemble things. Like Legos, like we're little kids or something. We're not allowed to manufacture. We are not in control of our ports, and we're not in control of our money flow. So it's not an issue of soldiers leaving. Soldiers leave. And believe me, even as a Palestinian, I understand security is an issue. Security is an issue in our region. Security is an issue with what's going on around us. Because outside of these borders, this is still Palestine. Palestine is from the river to the sea and from Ras al Nakura to Tal Rashash. Because Palestinians do not identify with what the UN sanctioned. Palestinians identify with every single inch of this land. I have two daughters-in-law from two depopulated villages in the north. And that's Palestine, even though they have Israeli settlers. I mean, for us, they're sitting on their stolen property. Their houses still exist. Going back to the point, can we guarantee anything? No. What exists? Okay, I think the military presence makes up for the fact there's all these missing things. Now somebody's going to retort and say, yeah, but you got all these ministries, but we don't have a democratic process, we don't have representation, and we don't have power. So, it's weird. It's a weird symbiosis. Like, the military should leave, but what's going to stay? And what's it going to be transitioned? And do we get the same deals as Oslo? And the PA is not doing that well either when it comes to abuses, because there's no way to hold them accountable. The PA is also abusing people. They're abusing people from PFLP and Hamas. Everybody that's in jail on their side. There's also the security coordination. So it's not about building Palestine, it's just managing Palestinians. Do we make a transition from management to actual autonomy? Or are we just, going to happen like what happened in Oslo? I mean, we already went through this.
Right. So.
And we're pissed. I mean, we are pissed. We are.
Understandably.
So
understandably.
I don't know how. So if you have a large majority of people are really pissed, I don't know how to translate that. This does not mean I don't want Israel to pull out, but nobody's sitting down to come up with something that actually makes sense either Israelis or Palestinians, and we are perfectly capable of doing it.
Right. So, so I guess you would agree that pulling out unilaterally, it's not realistic. It's not something that we can do tomorrow. So you think the next practical step would be to begin to allow Palestine to be an independent state, so they could have the institutions in place that wouldn't allow Hamas to take over after
What's wrong
Israel
with
goes
Hamas?
in?
But you tell me what's wrong with Hamas? What has Hamas done for? Okay, you have to look at it as a Palestinian.
Mm-hmm.
Hamas represents the observant Palestinian. PFLP and Fatah never did that. It holds
Mm-hmm.
up values. There's about, and they fluctuate. Hamasis are people who fluctuate. So you have the people who are for violent resistance, and you have people who are like, because under I mean Islamic law, we should be talking to our enemies, and you're
Right.
allowed to. You're even encouraged to learn their language. So you see these fluctuations. So you have a population that feels represented under Hamas. You have to know why. You can't obliterate them. They came up for a reason.
Yep, I agree. And I think that the current conditions of the Palestinians and the despair they are in strengthens the support for Hamas. But
Absolutely.
I see many issues with Hamas. One is their views of Jews living on this land, and the other is how they treat Palestinians.
Hmm.
I don't want
No,
that.
some of the
I don't want that for us. I
look
don't want
they
that for you guys either.
right, but they've built schools, they've built hospitals. When you're people on the run and a people who are unstable, and somebody comes in and offer these little things of stability, they seem pretty cool. So those things that are missing, and then for the shaheeds, the martyrs, they're the ones that support the families. My kids went to a school that was more observant, and there were a lot of kids who were orphans, and they were orphans from Israeli violence and terrorism, and that school was supporting them. So they take on the orphans, they send them to university, and they give the widows money. And this is part of the quote unquote where we what is it, incentivize killing. No, that's not what happens. You have people who are orphans, and there's no public sector to take care of them. I mean, UNRWA only does so much. Government cheese does not cover your kids' tuition.
Right. Right. Yeah, in Israel it's viewed as incentivizing killers, but it's really just taking care of families and
And
orphans. Right.
it's a different reality, and it also existed in the camps in Lebanon, mostly the camps in Lebanon. It's the martyrs, and then again, martyrs are a totally different thing in Islam. It's a totally different understanding. So basically, I mean, just to give you in a nutshell, all Palestinians are considered walking martyrs. Why? Because we are withstanding occupation. So just our living under oppression makes any one of us a martyr. Living under oppression on this land, because this land is, Ard al-Muqaddas. So this is holy land. So we get like double, triple whammies here
Right.
on religious incentives.
I think that's a very important nuance, that Palestinians support Hamas not because Hamas wants to kill Jews, but because Hamas has helped them. People often miss these levels of complexity when it comes to viewing other people. They view it in terms of, their own narrative and their own fear. So they're like, oh, Hamas was democratically elected in Gaza. That means the Gazans want to kill
Want
us.
to kill?
Right.
But if you're going to argue with it as an Israeli, you have to look at the Hamas charter. Hamas charter would not say anything. It doesn't give you any clues to what they've done when it comes to civil society. So the Hamas charter, if you ask your average Hamasi, they have no idea what the charter says. But
The
you ask your
average
average
Israeli does know.
I know.
They know
I
the
know.
part about about wiping Israel off the map. So that's the part that we know
I
very
know.
clearly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
And there's also some Quranic verses that are highly debatable. There's also the hadith, the sayings of the prophet that I think they've abused and misinterpreted.
Which we see in all religions, people taking the
Yeah.
text and interpreting it, how they wish. So can you see a situation where Hamas is willing to work with Israel?
They have. They've already. There was when Hania first took over, there was something called a coexistence paper that he wrote up. So they have been. I mean, look, I mean, they're still Islamists. And then look, Hamas is a little bit different because Hamas is contradictory. First of all, in Islam, nationalism is haram, it's prohibited. We do not believe in any type of ethnic rule. We believe in governance. If you know, in Islam, we do not separate politics and religion. The reason why we don't is because governance is supposed to reflect the foundations or the credos that we are taught. So first, they're heretics, more or less in a way, because nationalism is haram. But at the same time, they are protecting the land and they're protecting the people. And then third, in Islam, we have the right to defend ourselves. We believe in inherent rights. In Islam, we're a rights-based religion. So we believe there are certain rights for women, for men, for people, for humankind in general that are inherent. So if you're being attacked, you have the right to defend yourself. But the right to defend yourself is going to be interpreted differently from each person. And because, I mean, their ideology tends to shift on that, you're going to see the violent resistance.
Interesting.
And they feel that they are absolutely justified in doing it, as much of the PLO did, as PFLP, because of the way that they're being treated. So you mean violence with violence.
Right. I think we've given a nice background, and this is a good way to enter the deal of the century.
Okay.
I don't know if they've done polling yet. I couldn't find any, but I have yet to meet a Palestinian who supports the deal of the century. The Israeli narrative on this is it's just more rejectionism from the Palestinians. They won't agree to anything. And there's really nothing more we can do, which this was the narrative prior to the deal of the century. The deal of the century just further reinforces it. So I'd love to hear from you why this deal is so bad in the eyes of Palestinians, and what a good deal would look like.
I'm insulted that somebody like Trump and Kushner are the people who tell us what to do. Okay, we deserve much better. Okay, we have people on the ground that are absolutely capable and willing to sit down and listen to everyone and come up with something that we can all agree on. The difference between Israel and the difference between all the other occupations is that Israel's not leaving. And this is something that Palestinians have not come to terms to. We always think you're going to leave like the Turks did, the British and the Jordanians, and everyone else. I don't know if that means I'm a normalizer or I'm a realist, but I have no idea.
I'd say you're a realist.
So even if we're going to take, look at Syria. Syria was depopulated in a short amount of time. It didn't really work out. It's not looking good. So I don't understand how people that are thinking that, depopulating Israel is not going to be an easy thing. I think the better deal is for us to realize that whoever's here is here, and that we need to come to some kind of conclusion together. And I also, again, going back to, there are people who are capable, and it doesn't have to be limited to where we're always thinking in the paradigm of Jew and Arab. We have to think in the paradigm of what is good for everyone, and how will this land be able to transform from the post-colonial crap we were handed, excuse my academic term. So
okay. We allow cursing on this podcast, so feel free.
Okay. So when are we going to, be able to evolve? Now, the rejectionism, again, because me personally, I do not believe in a two-state solution. I believe we are already in one state that's dysfunctional. I believe in turning it into one state that is functional. We're everywhere. We cannot be designated to certain areas, and you guys are everywhere too. But you guys have privileges, and we have nothing. So how do we bring that? How do we bring that together? I don't know. And the thing is, the people that should be talking are not. We don't have a
Right.
constitution. We don't know what I don't recognize the state. Me, that's just because the state does not recognize me. I
Hmm.
consider everything inside the green line that is occupied Palestine. And until Israel finally concedes and recognizes the fact that it would never exist without Palestine, I'll never recognize it. Even though
If
I recognize, even it's such a paradox because I don't want to. There's so many Israelis that I love, and I go to their houses, and I love their children. And I'm not saying this to be sweet or some kind of cliche like after school special thing. No, I really do feel that, but I don't know how to bring it together, and it's not going
right,
to take just me.
right. I think it's very, very important to differentiate between critique of a government and critique of a people, even if those people vote for that government, because like we mentioned earlier, when people vote, it's primarily not just one issue. There's a lot of reasons for why they vote. And nations that have a very strong fear narrative, like both of our nations do, we often vote for security, and often the person who's promising the most security makes us feel the most safe, but then in turn causes the most harm to the other side. So
Correct.
we need to understand the difference between government and people, and to not let our disdain for a government or an institution spill over into hate for people, because that
Right.
spillover causes more fear, more hate, more radicalization, and then we just continue to vote for more extreme politicians. So
Absolutely.
it's essential
You
for
know,
both sides to show that we in fact love each other and that we want to work together. But we're
well, you
far.
see, like my life's work right now is heading a learning center, and the reason that we started it is me, and it's actually started with my daughter because she went to the Hebrew U, and the thing that she found was that when Palestinians were coming into the Hebrew U, they were at such a disadvantage because they don't go through the Israeli high school system. So the bagrut, all this stuff. So the students came together, the other Palestinian students came together, sort of create a support network of tutoring, helping, counseling, and we turned that into an organization. And the thing that I've discovered is how much Palestinians, I mean, I'm not going to say everything is, has to be in a book, but for instance, like Palestinians, again, I'm going to keep stressing this, Israelis are not brought up in their schools. Um, Another thing is, so how would you deal with the people that don't, quote unquote, don't exist? And if they do exist, they're monsters in the form of uniforms and guns and watchtowers. Two, Palestinians never take any type, we're talking about the rejectionism. They do not take government, econ, any of that in school. The only time you're introduced to government is through, and this is why I think there's a huge resurgence of Islamic support, is through Islamic studies. That is the only time that a lot of these kids take any type of government. So they have no idea that how government works, that you have the right to vote. They would probably learn that in college, that if they take the class. So you have this whole generation of people who go out, and then, I mean, if they know anything about it, it's because they either went to college outside or some kind of personal endeavor. So they don't, I mean, I don't know how to put that. Like when you have that background, you have that base, it's so easy to keep people the way they are, or to caged, or to be accepting, or to be rejectionist. Rejectionism also comes from the fact, again, a lot of the Palestinians don't come from just one area. We come from the whole of Palestine. And to tell us that we're going to be designated just to one area, or to recognize a state that doesn't even treat me as a human being, I mean, why? I mean, why would I accept it?
Right. And so you mentioned a one-state solution. if the peace plan were to be, there's one state for Israelis and Palestinians from the river to the sea, we're all equal under the law. Do you think
Mm-hmm.
that would be accepted by the majority of Palestinians?
That's what we've been asking for the whole time. But the problem is that Palestine has evolved and it has these people on it called Israelis. Palestine is not what it was in 48. It is not the peasant Camelot that we left behind in Nakba.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hear our songs and you see our movies and you see, a lot of people, even the people in the camps, they have this totally different idea of when they think of Palestine returning, and I see it. I mean, I have it in my head. Palestine's going to come back. We think of that dream of that perfect place that probably never existed, of that coming back to us. And It's the same dream that Jews had of coming to Zion. That empty land just beckoning and waiting.
Right.
Dripping with honey and milk.
So I see the one state solution as, in many ways, a great solution, the best solution, because it seems like one of the issues with the two-state solution is both people want access to the entirety of the land. Nobody wants to give up half. One state solution seems to solve that. I'll tell you my personal concerns about a one state solution, and I know many Israelis share this concern with me. It has something to do with the demographic issue. Now, many Israelis are concerned for their security once Palestinians, let's say one day Palestinians become a majority. Will we still be safe? That's one question. The other comes down to social issues. So I think Israel is already potentially in danger with the progression of social issues, because our fastest growing population is the Hasidic Jewish community. Right. And when it comes to social issues, they're quite regressive, at least regressive compared to how I want a country to be socially. The Hasidic Jews' view on social issues is more in line with Palestinians than they are in line with how I see the world. So, I'm a secular Jewish liberal. I'm not confident that Israel will be a liberal democratic state in 50 years under a one-state solution. So that really is my biggest concern, and I don't have any way around that aside from perhaps a federation solution, which is one state, one country with multiple smaller states inside, and the local communities get to govern their local states, similar to what we have in Switzerland or the European Union. People have compared it to that as well.
Well, look, there's something you have to bring up. First of all, the emergence of Hamas. Look, when I first got married in the 90s and the first Intifada, no women covered. And it was a joke if you were religious. This is all new. This is all within the past 20 years. Go back and look at pictures from Intifada 1 and go back and look at everything post-Intifada 2 and look at the women and look how it's changed. The PLO was absolutely secular. Even in, let's say, I don't know what you'd call the camps, because we have a lot of family who grew up in the camps, and I'm talking about Lebanon. So you had these little microcosms of Palestinian society, and they were as secular as they can be. Even Sharia was taken over by the PLO. So they had totally obliterated. So when two people wanted to get married, they would go to their to the general who was of their area, either PFLP or Fatah. So the society that we had known evolved, and it evolved into a secular society. Then it regressed, and this is how I see this emerging religious parts that's coming. There is a type of regression. It does have a lot to do with despair that both sides are having. And I think if people are offered hope, they'll move away from that. I mean, look at me, a Shi'arim here in Jerusalem. It really used to be this big. Now it's like this whole area. Places where I used to shop, they took it over. Y'all have the burqas, the burqa Jews now, the women who cover their whole face. Those are all over the place. Who would have thunk? Who'd have thunk 20 years ago If you told someone that, they'd be like, impossible. That would never happen in Jewish society.
Right. So, I
So
mean, you make a
you're
great
right.
point.
I don't know. For me, I think it has to go back to, but y'all's religious are a little bit different than ours. Ours, y'all have the suck thing and the dress. Ours aren't as detectable, but another phenomena of this thing is Islamic schools. We never had this before. 20 years before, never. Everybody thought you were nuts if you told them I was going to send my kid to an Islamic school.
So,
The,
right. So really what you're saying is that fear and despair fuel radicalization, not only
and
political radicalization, but also religious radicalization.
absolutely. Because people, and then I don't understand how you're going to come up with a two-state solution. Yeah, okay, y'all want us to get away from you. We're everywhere. We're in your hospitals. We're in your homes. I mean, we're your black labor force.
Right.
I mean, we're also your doctors. We're your pharmacists.
Right.
So I don't know how y'all get. I know Sharon tried in Intifada 2. They were importing all these Asians, but the problem is that when y'all start importing work, the money starts going out, and Israel can't afford that. So employing us is a lot more beneficial. If I look at it as an Israeli.
Yeah.
Because we keep, because our disposable income goes back in the Israeli economy.
Right. And I mean, even more so, it's I still haven't found a way to separate that doesn't just cause immense harm into one population or another. It's like uprooting people from their homes, not giving people access to sites that they view holy, not letting people travel freely to their families. These are things that are demoralizing, they're dehumanizing, they cause immense pain and suffering. And I've yet to hear a good solution for how to solve that.
See, another thing I've been thinking, if you don't mind,
Sure.
you see, the Jewish religion, we don't understand it, and there's a lapse in Revelation, more or less. For y'all, this is heaven. Basically, the Jewish religion does not have the whole idea of heaven or the afterlife, and that's why Jews feel more or less like from what I understand, the mitzvahs and and certain religious observances can only happen here or should happen here. We do not understand that at all. And the other thing is that it scares the hell out of us because it gives y'all it has given the Jews in their eyes license over what we own, and we've never been able to discuss that or come to terms about it because we have totally different views,
right,
or beliefs about it.
I wouldn't be the best person to ask about this.
Neither am I. But you see that those are things that need to be talked about, and nobody brings it.
For sure, yeah.
And nobody's talking about it, and I think it would diffuse a lot. Because honestly, even though I am an observant Muslim, I'm highly skeptical of the type of Islamicism that is coming about, because it's not focused on the things that I know that are our foundations, and like you said, I think they're more focused on fear,
I recently saw an interesting, more interesting polling about percentage of populations that support Sharia as the law of the nation. And it was fascinating to see the difference between countries. So, there's this narrative that Muslims will just always be regressive, that they just, they all want Sharia. They don't support rights for women or gays. And, when you look at the Middle East, there's a lot of evidence to support those notions as well. But when you look at countries and their support for Sharia, one of the highest nations that support Sharia is the Palestinian nation. It was something like 89%. in Lebanon, it was like 29%. And in Uzbekistan, it was like 7%. So this just shows that it's not about being Muslim that makes you support one view or another, because there's so much diversity and vastly different opinions within the Islamic community. But it seems like the environment that these Muslims are living in is what really affects their many of their religious views. And that's quite fascinating. And it really shows that if we can build an environment that is safer, that gives people hope, that's more inclusive, then I think there is a very strong case to make that we can have less radical Islamicism, as you said. That actually gives me hope. Do you think that? So would you think it's fair to say that the progression of social issues in Palestine is affected by the fact that Palestinians are living under an occupation?
Oh, absolutely. There's a social issue. Look, I don't think we entered the modern age through the occupation, because before 48, you can say we were basically how everything had been from Jesus till the Ottomans.
I'm listening. I just plugged my phone in. Sorry.
Okay. And then from there, so basically, and we never really had a transition phase. So with social issues, I think they've been put more or less on the back burner for political issues.
I'll be back with you in a minute.
Okay.
Technical stuff. Okay. So I see that we only have 8 minutes left. So we have maybe one more topic to touch on. So
you were talking about social issues are a huge thing. But look, let me put it, in the resistance, in the PLO, it did free up a lot of things. You have two totally we have been able to tackle them and we haven't, because there's also the whole struggle for survival and existence. So, I don't know. I mean, I think with the emergence of, when I'm comparing with the emergence of the Islamic movement, okay, here's the thing. When I first got married, weddings were mixed gender. Now they're not. There's now when you go to weddings, people will ask, is it mixed gender or is it separated, or is it separated? And a lot of people will not attend because now, I mean, this is the thing. There was a quote unquote fatwa that it's haram to go to a place where males and females mix. And now this is the majority. And well, my wedding, this is a huge thing, especially for the Palestinian. The Palestinian wedding is such a huge part of our culture, and it's something you look forward to. The whole community participates in. Right. It's never been segregated. So there are issues and they are becoming under the guise of Islamic values, where they keep separating and based it in the misogyny, and it has nothing to do with Islam. Basically the covering, most places, now I don't cover. So it's affected a lot. And then Sharia law being accepted again, majority Sunni population, and that's all they're taking in school. So they think that's the way to go.
Right.
And the Islamics are really good about literature. They print up stuff like crazy. Nobody else does it like them.
It's actually similar with Jewish religious people as well. They're very good at outreach and having literature and handing it out. Even there's this,
and the posters.
Posters. Yeah, there's this guy for years. I see him. You leave a nightclub in Tel Aviv, he's there handing out books to, these.
Bring you on the straight path.
Yeah. I'd leave a club and he's like, "Hey, you want this?" I'm like, "No, thank you, but have a great night." But yeah, he sees it. These are secular people. deviants of sorts, right? Look at them at the club drinking, having fun. So, he sees that as an effective form of outreach. I personally have no issue with that because it's not harmful. It's not aggressive,
Right.
but the more, I think one of the downsides we've seen in social media is really the increase in our ability to communicate cross borders, but that has a downside that people are radicalizing one another through social media as well. So
Absolutely.
that just strengthens the point that those who want peace, those who want the world to become a better place, really need to work hard.
To make I honestly see a more principle-based movement coming about. That's what I'm hoping for. Not one that's, because look, I cannot, me and you've just gone the whole spectrum of Jewish and Israeli society and Palestinian society. I can't define Palestinian for you. People here wouldn't call me Palestinian. I was born in diaspora and I came back. I'm third generation. Like when my grandfathers left, they left because they were fleeing the Turkish army. But we never gave up who we were. We kept our Arabic and we kept our religion. But I still got to have my grits and I still have the twang when I talk. And sometimes it does carry over to the Arabic. Yeah. So I can't define either one of those. I can't define Jew for you. So either way, I don't know. And I think it has to go back to principles and the fact that we have to accept that two people have been created on this land. And
I agree completely. And I think it says a lot about the complexity of this conflict that we've now spoken for around an hour. We've said a lot, and yet we can speak for another days and days and days and days. We haven't really touched anything. Before we wrap.
So I would love to see reorganized nonviolent civil disobedience. We need to see more groups. We need to start talking about education. We need to learn each other's language. It just enriches. And and Palestinians have to be in every Israeli space and start challenging every single idea that exists out there. So. Well,
beautifully said. I don't think I even have anything to add to that. I think you summed it all up perfectly. And I'd love to have you back on in the near future. I think we still have a lot to talk about. I think that your perspective and your life experience really is impactful and can really show people, a side to Palestine that they don't see often. So I really appreciate that. And it's been an honor speaking to you.
Thank you, Adad. And you're more than welcome in Jerusalem and Shafat.
Next time I'm there, I will definitely reach out. I'll definitely reach out. Great, Kefah. A great pleasure.
Thank you. Yalla. Bye. Bye.